So welcome to our webinar 6, and we're right at the midpoint of our webinar series. Today's topic is asset preservation and maintenance and transportation asset management and transportation asset management plans. As you know, these webinars are held every 2 months, and the next webinar addressing asset management and adaptation to climate change and extreme weather events will be held November 13th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. For more information on webinars and for past webinar archives, please visit tam.transportation.org and click webinars. If you have any suggestions or for future webinars and have questions for the presenters today during today's webinar, please submit your comments and questions using the webinar's Q&A feature, which you'll find at the top of the menu bar. As we have entered lecture mode, and all of the presenters should hit star 6 when it's their turn to speak. So with that, I will turn it over to Steve Gay of Federal Highway, who will give us an overview of the topic. Steve?
Yes. FHWA is pleased to sponsor this webinar in cooperation with AASHTO. There are topics that I'm really excited about. We've talked a whole lot about the preservation and maintenance, and we see them mentioned more in MAP 21 than we have in past regulations. And the whole issue of asset management plans, which all state DOTs are to develop by October 1st, 2015. We had a joint meeting of the two AASHTO subcommittees back in July, and it was a very interesting topic and discussion at that. Today's presentations are from the peer exchanges, July 24th and 25th this year, part of the Subcommittee of Maintenance and Subcommittee on Asset Management joint meeting. We talk about routine maintenance, preservation. I think the key things that we've been talking about from the asset management side, that this maximizes the value of transportation investments. And if you go to the MAP 21 definition of asset management, it clearly talks about having a sequence of activities for maintaining, preserving the assets for the long term, managing for the whole life. And when we talk about this in the asset management plans, can be addressed under life cycle costs, and you're certainly addressing it in the financial plans that you're looking at what needs to be done in the next X years. Are we talking 10 years or longer to maintain that, with preservation being a key issue to be discussed? And I know quite often, different silos of an agency and how they communicate sometimes is great and sometimes could be better. I think it's a key as state DOTs move ahead in developing their asset management plans that the maintenance preservation folks are at the table, because it's critical, crucial. As an industry, we need better information on how well preservation treatments perform. I know Federal Highway's Office of Asset Management undertook a study a number of years ago looking at the life from different pavement preservation treatments. And there was some good data there, but there was an awful lot lacking. So, one thing to walk away from this webinar with is, as you're looking at putting together your asset management plan, does your state DOT have good data coming out of the pavement management system on what are the life of your pavement treatments? And on the bridge side, I don't know how much data there is, but I don't believe there's much on the various preservation treatments. Next slide. States need to develop the risk-based asset management plans in compliance with MAP 21. Once again, here's the definition for a state of good repair in that structured sequence of events. We have a pilot project where we're working with New York DOT, Minnesota DOT, and Louisiana DOT, developing their asset management plans. I'm going to hear from Louisiana here in a little bit. And preservation and maintenance is a key part of it. I'm excited about this topic. I think a key is, from the planning side, is how is a stepped long-term plans developed. How is preservation captured in those? Because I know, at least, I'll say this, in a lot of them, the preservation side is not captured. I think I said that in a nice way. And I think we need to have that dialogue of breaking down the silos and how to capture that, and what are the O&M costs, and how are they captured by the MPOs, et cetera, as we all move ahead. On the whole performance-based planning, if we work with our Office of Planning, this is a topic that often comes up and is a key for the success of all our programs. At this turn, let me turn it back over to Yana.
Thanks, Steve. Today we'll hear three perspectives on how states are integrating maintenance into their asset management programs. Our presenters today will discuss agency efforts in building their transportation asset management plans and integrating maintenance condition assessments into their asset management decision-making cycle. Presentations will address specific challenges, success factors, key benefits obtained, and will highlight successful approaches for strengthening the relationship between maintenance, transportation asset management plans, and results-driven decision-making. Together, we will explore the strategic and operational benefits that state DOTs are achieving by more closely aligning maintenance and asset management programs. As mentioned previously, the purpose of the webinar series is to share lessons learned, ideas, and knowledge with the asset management community. For this webinar, the primary learning objectives are building working knowledge of key concepts and definitions in the areas of preservation, maintenance, asset management programs, and transportation asset management plans. Understanding specific approaches being used to develop a MAP 21 transportation asset management plan, and applying this knowledge to begin to answer questions like how are maintenance and asset management integrated, and how is maintenance being addressed in transportation asset management plans. The agenda today will start off by hearing from, we started off by hearing from Steve, and I will introduce our speakers before each presentation, but in brief, we'll have Vince Latino and Jason Chapman of the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development. Next, we'll hear from Jennifer Brandenburg of the North Carolina Department of Transportation. And our third presentation, we will hear from Martin Kidner of Wyoming Department of Transportation. At the end, we'll have Q&A. And just another reminder, if you have a question for any of the presenters or a question to pose to all of the presenters in general, please enter them in the Q&A feature of the webinar menu bar at the top anytime during the presentation, and we'll see them as they come in, and we will go through them after Martin is done with his presentation. Our first presentation is from Vince Latino and Jason Chapman. Vince joined the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development in 1992 in the bridge maintenance section, working with movable bridges, tunnels, and pumping stations. Vince moved to his current position as Chief Maintenance Engineer in 2009. In his current position, he is also working on the Asset Management System implementation and is co-chair of the department's Transportation Asset Management Plan Committee. Jason Chapman joined the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development in 1996. He began his career in the Bridge Management Office and was responsible for the implementation of Pontus and the BMS program within the DOTD. In 2009, he was promoted to the administrator position within the same office and is now responsible for the state highway inventory, traffic monitoring, GIS mapping, bridge and pavement management programs. Vince and Jason will share with us the story of Louisiana's Transportation Asset Management Plan project. And now I'll turn it over to Vince and Jason.
Thank you, Deanna. This is Jason. I have Vince with me right now. We are with the Louisiana DOTD. We're going to talk about the Transportation Asset Management Plan project that's going on here in Louisiana. Quick overview, we're going to go over the Asset Management Plan status, some existing data that DOTD has been collecting over the years, some current tasks that have been assigned through this Asset Management Plan, and some of the significant challenges that we have ahead of us as we're getting into this plan. Next slide, please. So our TAM status. Next slide, please. There we go. So in 2011, DOTD created a Transportation Asset Management Steering Committee. On that committee, our Undersecretary for the Management of Management and Finance, Mr. Michael Bridges, created this, was kind of leading the charge and was the executive champion of the asset management implementation. Earlier this year, prior to us getting involved in the pilot project, he approached myself and Vince to co-lead this effort and try to keep the plan going and to help coordinate the effort of putting everything together. Currently, I am trying to get a full-time position created as an asset management engineer to help further this along and to take it from here into the future so that we can keep this thing rolling. Earlier in 2011, we conducted the NHI Transportation Asset Management course with the executive staff and the Asset Management Committee, as well as the district administrators. So we all came in and met with the NHI course instructors to go over what an asset management plan was back then, back in 2011. So we've come a long way and are moving forward in this effort. DOTD here in Louisiana was one of the 3 states selected to participate in the FHWA pilot program to put together the asset management plan. We met earlier this year in the first quarter of 2013, just several months ago, to get all of the consultants and Federal Highways involved to meet with us to start the plan and discuss how we would need to move forward. Next slide, please. So from that first meeting, a draft work plan was developed. We met with the process owners to assign tasks as identified in the work plan. So all of these tasks have been assigned and doled out to the different process owners within the department. We are scheduling a second and third meeting with the consultants to come in and help us with, next week in September, this month, we're going to be talking about life cycle cost analysis and going over some of the agency risk factors and getting into the project level and program level risk factors that's going to be needed to go into the plan. Well, we have a third meeting scheduled in October to go over the financial plan and some of the performance measures that are going to be required coming out of this plan moving forward. We are thinking that we'll be done with the final draft by the end of this calendar year, and hopefully we'll have the plan ready to be implemented, and we can start creating some performance measures based on a lot of the data that we have. Next slide, please. DOTD's existing data. We've been doing asset management in some form or shape for quite a while in the areas of pavement and bridge management. We've been doing an automated collection process using the vans that ride the roads probably since about 1995. So we have a lot of data on the pavement management data that we can use to create performance measures, and we actually have done a lot of performance measures with that information. We've been collecting PONUS element level data and been doing inspections since around 2008. So we have a good 2 cycles of bridge inspection data at an element level that we can summarize and put into the plan and start creating performance measures. DOTD, like I said, has in the past used this information to create performance measures and targets for roads and bridges, so we're not really that new to this area, but as we get into the risk and other assets that need to come into the plan, those definitely need to be identified as we're moving forward. DOTD has many plans already in place. Some of these plans include strategic plans, the STIP, our long-range plan, as well as our capital and operating budgets. Vince is going to step in for a second and talk about the Agile Asset System and what's been going on with that.
On the maintenance side of the house, we've implemented Agile Assets as our asset management system, which right now is doing a lot of our work orders on maintenance management of our system. We implemented that in November of 2010. We're getting some really good data out of the system now. This is something I've actually used to run some reports this year to find out how much, where do we spend our money and how much do we spend where on what activities. We have started including into Agile Assets a few of the assets such as traffic signals. Bridges are already in there. Of course, our roadways are in there because that's the base map. We're also we have ITS equipment in there, and we have sound walls. We're in the process of putting signs and we're starting to look at other assets to put into Agile so we can book work directly to those assets. In doing that, going for the future, so that looking at in the future to include these assets in the TAM, we're going to need a condition assessment off of these assets. That's one thing we really didn't have in the system as it is now, but we're looking at going toward. We just met yesterday on using the Agile's bridge inspection module to do our ancillary structures. I think that's something we'll be doing very soon that we're working toward going with. So as we start getting in the future, getting our other assets in, we wanted to get our feet wet with pavement and bridge because we've had a lot of history and that's what we have, to put that in the TAMP, and we'll be growing in the future by adding these other assets in as the systems grow and we get more maturity with the data. Next slide.
Thanks, Vince. So some current asset management tasks that are ongoing. We've been working with the consultants to help us and to further along our team meetings and develop our work plan. From that draft plan, we've assigned tasks. Tasks have been assigned to the process owners as we're moving forward, and we've given them some targeted completion dates to get a lot of the data together that needs to go into the plan. Next slide, please. So with FHWA assistance and as part of the pilot program, the consultants from Cambridge and AMEC helped us put together this draft plan. So this has already been created for us. There are many tasks that were in there that had to be given out to the process owners here in the department to gather a lot of the information. What was created from that plan, we put together each of the recommendations from the work plan were gathered and put in a spreadsheet to assign these tasks, like I said, to the process owners to be worked on. In all, there were 33 tasks assigned. There's just a few of them here that we're showing, and who they've been assigned to, and hopefully what due date we expect to have them back to be included in the plan. Next slide, please. So after reviewing the Minnesota and Australia Vic Roads documentation on risk tools, we met with executive staff to begin developing a risk register at the agency level. So that's what you're looking at right now is the agency risk register. Is actually 12 risks identified in all, ranging from public opinion to funding issues, identified and also rated. Next slide, please. As we're moving forward, we need to keep working on this risk register. This is something that's a fairly new concept for us to include in our management systems. That's something that we haven't addressed previously, so it's kind of new for us. We need to continue identifying the project and program level risks to also include into the plan. One of the big challenges for us is how do we incorporate this data into these programs. There's been a lot of work on the PONUS side as well as the pavement management DTM side to starting including some of the risks that will be identified in these spreadsheets inside the software itself to help us identify risk and help us move it along. We've scheduled meetings to discuss financial plans and investment strategies and also life cycle costs. A big challenge for us is understanding how the Transportation Asset Management Plan fits into the Department's policies and plans. With that, that's the end of our presentation. I guess if anybody has any questions, we can... one more thing from Vince. We'll let Vince close this out.
I wanted to say a little bit more on the life cycle costs. And one of the things tying this back into what the presentation was kind of talking about is how that we getting maintenance costs into our TAM. One of the things with the life cycle costs that we're going to try to include into ours, I don't know if we'll get into the first iteration, but we definitely will be working this in, would be trying to get not just the maintenance cycles on the capital side of we add this roadway in. We know in 10 years we're going to need this preservation treatment done to it. But also, what are the costs year to year on the maintenance side, operation cost, if we add an asset in? I think that's one of the big things that we want to incorporate into our life cycle costing and budget analysis for the department itself. I think that's one area where we do want to go and continue to grow toward.
With that, Deanna, we're going to throw it back to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, definitely if you have questions to Vince and Jason, please enter them into the Q&A feature of the webinar tool. So our next presentation is from the North Carolina Department of Transportation. Jennifer Brandenburg is the State Asset Management Engineer for the North Carolina DOT. In this position, she's responsible for monitoring the performance of the department's maintenance program through the setting and measuring of maintenance operations and performance management. This role includes the administration of the DOT's maintenance management system and the maintenance condition assessment program. In addition to various national research committees, Jennifer currently serves as the vice chair of the AASHTO Highway Subcommittee on Maintenance. She is the past chair of the Performance Measures Focus Group, which coordinates the Maintenance Quality Assurance Library website for benchmarking of common maintenance measures. Jennifer is going to speak to us about North Carolina DOT's approach to integrating maintenance and asset management. Now I'll turn it over to Jennifer.
All right. Thank you, Yana. These are the points we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how North Carolina conducts our assessments, how we report our data, and then roll that into how we plan our work. Back to reporting, how we report our results out, and then I just want to give you some perspective over the years of how we've done so far, and then talk a little bit about the future and where we're headed to. Yana, next slide. So to give you a little perspective, North Carolina is the second largest transportation agency in the country. We have 300 or 400 miles less than Texas. We maintain 80,000 miles of roadway in North Carolina. Our interstates, our primaries, and our secondary system, what most states have is a county system, we maintain as a statewide agency. We are broken into 14 what we call highway divisions. These are the guys that actually do the work. And the one that's highlighted there is Division 5. That's the capital division, if you will. Raleigh is located in Wake County there at the bottom. Yana, if you'll go forward. We do 3 different types of assessments in North Carolina. We do a pavement condition survey, which I think most people do. We do a bridge condition survey, which is common, and then we do our maintenance condition assessment program. Because we have such a large system, the 100% survey on pavements and bridges takes a 2-year period to do. The maintenance condition program, again, because our mileage is so large, we don't do a 100% survey, we sample. And again, because our system is so large, we sample 22,000 samples, and they are a tenth of a mile in length. So we do a lot of survey data through the course of a 2-year period. We are now, all of our systems are rolling to a continuous process of surveying, and we are getting the last pieces of it to be done by consultant so that we can have a more objective picture of what's going on in our agency and on our roadways. And next slide, we'll talk a little bit about reporting that data out. So I collect all of this pavement data, bridge data, and maintenance data, and I have to report it back out to the divisions. What you're looking at on this slide is a scorecard for maintenance condition features. There are, we turn out statewide scorecards, division level scorecards for those 14 divisions for the interstate, and then we can give you county level data accuracy for primary and secondary systems. And then we take all of this data and we dump it into our maintenance management system so that we can come back out with the work plans and what you need to do. On the right, on the picture, you see the different elements that we score, and then again, these are the roadway type elements in our maintenance condition survey. I'll talk more later about pavement and bridge, but these are just the roadway type items. So you look there at Wake County, which is the capital county, on the secondary system, you see all of that green over there. So they're meeting their targets that we have set for them, with the exception of that one area of crossline pipes blocked. We would go back in and look at the data, QC the data just to make sure that that's accurate. And then any anomalies, such as we got 100 on curb and gutter. I live in Wake County. I know that 100 in curb and gutter is probably a little high, so we would go back and QC some of those things. But it may be that every sample we looked at was good, so that would give us 100. So there's a little bit of judgment that goes into these surveys as well. But you see that Wake County is doing much better. Their target is an 82, and they're scoring a 92. So that would give them cause to think, is there a better use of my funds than to go out and do some of these same roadway items where I'm already doing very well in. Next slide. So looking at all of the pavement or the ratings together, you see the pavement condition survey, you see there that the scores for that, the maintenance condition survey, and the bridge health index scores. We roll all of those surveys together, and we report this data back to our divisions. We do weight it, you see there, weight it by VMT and lane miles a little bit just to get perspective. If you read it vertically, you see the division-wide pavement score, the division-wide roadway maintenance kind of scores, and then the division-wide bridge scores. And then if you read it horizontally, you see everything on the interstate level that adds up to a far right hand to a score of an 82. This is statewide, or I'm sorry, an 84. So that the score for all of our systems on the interstate is a statewide score of an 84, which is a B. And then you see our primary score and our secondary score. Our overall score, how we grade ourselves, is a 75 or a C across the state. So we use these numbers in a variety of ways. We give it back to our divisions for planning purposes, but we also report it out to the public and the legislature when we talk about how much maintenance funding we need. But when we give it back to the divisions, next slide, these are the tools that they use to plan their work. So you saw the Wake County maintenance one where they're all green, so they can determine areas of deficiency. And in that example, they really didn't have a lot. They can take the infrastructure health scores and look across pavement, bridge, and roadway and see what are the deficiencies that they have across the three, and decide where they need to spend the money. They can determine their work functions. And what assets do I need to fix? Is it low shoulders? Do I need to do shoulder work? What kinds of things do I need to do? And then they use that planning data to report outputs of, we did this many shoulder miles, we did this many overlays, we did this many deck washings. Those are the outputs, but the outputs and the outcomes, what do those things give us score-wise, are all part of our employees' performance evaluation process. So once a year, I'm rated on the pavement condition, the bridge health rating, the crash rates. These are all things that our personal evaluations have on them. And there's a level in the organization where our employees are rated on outcomes, such as pavement condition, versus rated on outputs of numbers of tons of patching done, numbers of shoulder miles of shoulder repair done. That level moves a little bit depending on where you are in the organization, whether you're in maintenance or construction or what, but that we had a hard time explaining to the true maintenance workers that they should be rated on things like pavement condition. They didn't always see that was part of their responsibility. They saw that they did this work. So we have a mixture of outcomes and outputs. And then it gives us, these surveys give us a way of notifying or dealing with our critical maintenance needs. What are the big picture things we need to do? Next slide. A couple of ways that we have found to make it better and easier to do this planning is taking our condition assessment data and putting it on a map. So in this particular case, you'll see this is one of our coastal counties. The dots are the different samples that we took and looked at in the condition assessment survey. If they're red, they failed. If they're green, they passed. So if I'm the county maintenance engineer and I'm looking at this area, I see a couple of routes in the southwestern part of this county that I could just do shoulder work on the whole route or ditch work on the whole route and fix the ditches to improve those scores. So they use these maps and things for planning purposes. And the next one, this is a striping example, same sort of thing. I can see where my striping passed and where my striping failed. And in the case of striping in this county, which is actually a mountain county with a lot of snow, or a lot of snow for North Carolina, I can see that maybe I just need to do a county-wide striping sort of program. And if I'm part of a division, then I can look at the whole division and see because our striping crews are division-based, they cover multiple counties. Maybe I need to be working this year in this county, but the county next door looks pretty good, so maybe I can wait a year to get up there, and they can more efficiently make their rounds into how to do their work. Next slide. So we dump all that information, all the condition data, into our maintenance management system, and this is we also have Agile assets. This is a screenshot of Agile. And you can see this is the maintenance management section. So they are planning their work this is Brunswick County, administrative unit is Brunswick. They're planning their work and they've listed the work functions that they're going to do. And it looks like they're duplicated, but one of them is secondary and one of them is primary. Remember, we maintain both of those systems. So it's really not duplicated, it's the difference in the systems. But they can plan for spending an amount of dollars, or they can plan for doing an amount of work. Works both ways. So they plan their work in maintenance management. And then Yana, next one. This is also a way that they can show their plan graphically on a map. I know North Carolina is not alone, where we have paved a road and then cut it open and put a pipe in it, or striped a road and then come back and done an overlay. This is a way that the divisions can share their plans across all of their work units so that they can see which routes are going to be getting shoulder maintenance in this particular case. Maybe I'm the striping crew, I want to avoid that road for the time being, so I'll move to another part of the county. So they can share their plans and hopefully utilize their resources more efficiently and don't have to go back and do things that they've already done. Next slide. Those slides were based on condition-based planning. We also do some parts of our organization do cyclical-based planning. So what you see here, this is Division 6, where Fayetteville, North Carolina is, and Fort Bragg. They do their work based on more of a sectional kind of plan. So you see the numbers and the colors. Every county has a plan for how they're going to work their way around their county. And they'll start at 1, and they'll maybe work Section 1 and Section 13 this year, and then kind of work clockwise around. It's a cyclical approach. It works well for this certain division. They're able to cover things in a 5-year cycle and keep the work going. They have seen a significant decrease in their complaint calls because of this method, so this is another way that works really well. It does improve coordination. Maybe our chip seal operations are in one section of the county, and our spraying operations are in another part of the county, so they're not stepping over one another. Next slide. So we do all of this planning, we go out and we do the work, and then we have to report the outputs. This is a report out of MMS that shows our planned versus our actual operations. We can show it in dollars, we can show it in amounts of work done. They use these reports to help them stay on track with their plan. So you see mowing, at this particular point in the year, they've done about half of the mowing that they need to do. They would know intuitively that either I'm ahead or behind based on the time of the year that this report was made. One more way that we report outputs, next slide, is in our business system warehouse. So this is another way we report our outputs. You see the plan there. This is lateral ditches in Division 3. You'll see the plan that they do, and then they can see the actual year-to-date, and then they break it into quarters and how much they do each quarter. So they can see if they're on track or ahead or behind. And this particular reporting outputs has been a great graphical way to show data entry errors. In this particular case, lateral ditches is measured in shoulder miles, but if somebody calculates it in feet, or somebody putting the data in, fat fingers it and puts in a couple extra zeros, they can see immediately that they've got a data error, and they can go back in then and find it and fix it. So this has really improved the quality of the data that we get. Next slide. So those are how we report outputs. How we report outcomes. This is a public-facing dashboard. We've all got these, but you can see bridge health, pavement condition, and then roadside feature condition, and you see the scores that we have. You see the yearly statewide statistics there. You can also go in at the top where it says filter results, and this says statewide. You can do that by county. So I can see the actual results for Wake County, the county I live in, or Macon County, one of the mountain counties. I can actually see the results from my area. And then this is a public-facing outcome. Yana, next slide. This report is an internal-facing outcome, but this is that same back to the scorecard that we looked at a little earlier. So they've planned their work, they've done the work, and now they get the outcomes again. We do it once a year. We get the whole 22,000 samples done once a year, so they can see their results pretty quickly, come back to them. And we're back to this Wake County one that looks so great. But look back a little bit at past history. Next slide. Looking at where we've come from, this is those roadside features. This is blue is interstate, red is primary, and green is secondary. So you can see what gets measured matters. So you can see our scores continue to improve over time. And we took this to the legislature this year, and when we took these statewide scorecards, there was a lot of green. And we had a conversation with the legislature of, we're doing really, really well, which leads us to not that we need less money, but maybe we need to spend our money differently and spend it more efficiently. And they bought into that. Next slide. You'll see here the target, this is bridge condition, the target is in red and the blue line is actually percent good. For the last couple of years, they have funneled some of our system preservation money. They said you will spend it on bridges. So you'll see that bump at the end that we project is improved bridge conditions because we have shifted money into the bridge operations. Next slide. Now, we all know that when we shift money to one area over another, that conditions are going to change. So this is the pavement condition that we also took to the legislature. And you see the target there is an 80 on all. This is the overall pavement condition. You see our good is good, our fair is where we kind of want it to be, and our poor is trending down. The conversation we had with them is as we start shifting this money around and putting it all on bridges, be aware that our pavement conditions are probably going to drop off as well. So the next time we go to the legislature, we expect these pavement conditions to kind of drop off. And we were asking for the flexibility to be able to not to move the money between the assets in such a way that we could use these tools, these management systems, to make the best decisions. Next slide. Yana, next slide. So as we looked ahead, this presentation was done the first time last July. We had just signed into law this strategic mobility formula that had to do with our capital projects and the capital side of the house. It's now a little bit more into a structured program. They're working out the kinks on the data-driven process and how they want to do that. The system preservation funds have again been funneled all to bridges, so we expect the bridges to continue to improve, probably at the sacrifice of the pavements, and it'll take us a year or two to see that data. In the meantime, what's happened since this slide was done, they have asked us to look at how do we allocate our maintenance and operations money, our strictly state highway maintenance funds, and ask us to revamp that and come back with a more data-driven, needs-based approach. So we're in the throes of doing that the last couple of months. Coming out with new needs-based formulas. Our old allocation formulas were inventory-driven by lane miles or by population as a way to get at VMTs using population data. There was a little bit of need built in there, but not much. So we have changed them up to now they're more purely based on need in the areas. We're working through the kinks on that. We expect to get board approval in October of what we have as a first draft, and then this coming legislative year, we'll work with the legislature on, are the formulas we have, do they go far enough to meet what the legislature was looking for, as well as if we go to this needs-driven approach, we would like for them to take some of the restraints off of the money. For instance, the system preservation money right now can only be spent on bridges. If we can show you this needs-based approach, take that restraint off of the system preservation money and let us spend it on pavements and bridges as the systems tell us where the need is. So we're hoping to get there. We've got the new formulas. We've got the board on board, our Board of Transportation, and we're hoping to get the legislature on board in the next session when they come back to town. And with that, Yana, next slide, I think I'm finished. This is a group of ladies.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yes, I think if you have questions, again, please put them into the system and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. Thanks, Jennifer. Our final presentation is from the Wyoming DOT. Martin Kidner is going to speak to us about applying maintenance expertise in transportation asset management planning. Martin is currently the state planning engineer for Wyoming. His 27-year career began after graduating from South Dakota School of Mines and Technology with a bachelor's in civil engineering. He worked in various field offices for 15 years overseeing construction projects, before moving to district maintenance engineering. Then he went on to be the district engineer. After a deployment in the Middle East with the National Guard, Martin was appointed as the asset manager and then folded this duty into his current position as the state planning engineer. I'll turn it over to Martin.
Okay, thank you, Hanya. Next slide, please. And then the next, sorry. So basically I did a tongue-in-cheek here with silos are good, and you know, we're trying to decide whether silos are good or stovepipes of excellence is actually the better way to go. But my real key to it is that, you know, I'm trying to stress to other states that it's important to bring in the expertise like of maintenance or a pavement, bridge, geology, and so on and so forth, that, you know, there's people out there that understand these systems far better than, you know, possibly an asset management group could ever do. So it's important to bring all of those people together and build a team aspect of putting together the asset management plan. So next slide, please. So we really what I wanted to start with here, because we're trying to concentrate a little bit on how does the MAP 21 and the asset management plan requirements that are within that bill, within that law, actually play out. And what I've got here is 6 major sections that are required in the law. And you see down there, really one of the ones I'm going to concentrate a little bit on is life cycle cost, because as we heard from both Louisiana and from North Carolina, that you know, the whole thing of capturing how much are we actually spending from a maintenance standpoint to maintain those roads and bridges in the condition that they are in is an important thing to recognize in the asset management plan. So getting that maintenance treatments in a cost per year for things such as crack seals, chip seals, patching, those work on cleaning bridges, you know, all of those are just a critical thing to be able to gather in so that you can report to the legislature, just like what Jennifer was talking about earlier. Next slide, please. So, you know, my main thrust that I try to do as a state planning engineer, since I've got planning and programming both in my section, is really I'm trying to work out where I maintain the accountability for the decisions that we make in the spending cycles that we have. And Wyoming uses, as you can see here, this nested circle diagram, trying to show how, you know, basically all of our management decisions are really in a cyclic nature, and they nest within each other on that. You know, so, you know, how do your decisions affect a particular corridor, and how does the budget that you are putting forward support your performance goals? And or do we have to adjust our goals? And are the right projects being selected to support your goals and being checked against the asset management silos of excellence? You know, bottom line with the thing, it's just not a linear system. It's an ongoing, and it's got to always be looking back on itself. Next slide, please. So what Wyoming is doing in order to try to get an idea of whether our systems are actually performing correctly is we went with the corridor system. And so this particular one is between town of Rock Springs, Wyoming, and Jackson. And really, so this is, you know, how are the pavements actually performing out there when somebody gets on this major route, and it is an NHS route in Rock Springs off of I-80, can they connect with the Jackson area up there, and do the pavements actually give them the driver the ability to be able to safely drive that road and get the speeds and everything else that they are needing to do. So a lot of the times when people will ask me about, you know, how do you do comparisons and so forth, that Wyoming has gone more to a corridor type of package where we're looking at all the things, and this particular one is with system preservation. Next slide, please. So what that gave me the ability to do is, you know, by combining the money that we're spending on mobility and bridge and safety and pavement and incorporating some on the maintenance, we were able to start looking at and looking into the future. And that was the extreme power of some of the computing systems that we have now, is being able to say, well, with the spending that we're doing right now, you know, with the splits that we have and the current highway program of, that you can see there, well, how much more do I need to get to the level that people are asking for, and, getting to our goal. And as you can see up there in the side note there, really what we came up with, we needed another $134.5 million for bridge and pavement in order to get to the stated goals that we had. Next slide, please. I wanted to spend a few minutes here talking about, well, how does Wyoming go ahead and do project selections and so forth, and this particular one is coming out of our materials branch for the asset management plan. So first of all, we have the road split off into three systems, interstate, all the rest of the NHS that are not interstate, and then basically the entire rest of the department, the rest of the highways that we have owned by the state. So basically, I used to call it interstates, primaries and secondaries out there. We then estimate the budgets available for each one of those out of the overall DOT budget. And then we turn that basically back into our materials branch and ask them to optimize the strategies using a mix of heavy, medium, and light treatments. And, what you see up there is the 1S, 2S, 3S. So, those are light, medium, and heavy. And basically, they use the power of the computers out there with the modern calibrations that we have in there in order to come up with a list of recommended projects and mixes based on the output of the computer. Then the optimal scenario that we have, goes back out into these recommended projects, out into the field where the field looks at them. We have discussions about whether we need to modify any of those or not, and basically running through a cycle back with materials until it's decided what the actual treatments are needed out there. Then after the projects are selected, then planning and programming here with our asset management goes back and double checks to ensure the project selected would give us some miles of treatment to provide the desired performance. And, just kind of giving a shout out over there to Jennifer and what she was talking about, because really, it gets back into, you're looking for miles of treatment. You're not looking for dollars spent or tons placed on the road. It's as she was putting, a linear feet of, shoulder improvement or something like that. It's really what we're looking for. So, it needs to go beyond the dollar amount. So, but I will say one thing is that Wyoming still continues to struggle with some of the patching and other maintenance things, the thin treatments that we do in the life cycle. And a little bit later here, I'll describe why that is actually critical. Next slide, please. I want to beat the drum that North Carolina was talking about, that some of this, it's a zero-sum game, and you're going to improve something even with the best of the computing and selection criteria. You're going to improve some things, and some things are going to fall by the wayside. And I use this as an example because even though that this chart was several years old, but bottom line, what you see there is what Wyoming did, what the materials branch did, to go back to our decision makers, is that we said, okay, well, here's a whole bunch of different ways that we can take the overall money that budget split that we had for materials branch. And they said, well, if we shift, because at that time we were using some of the money eligible for both the NHS on both interstate and off interstate NHS routes. And so we were saying, well, what would happen if we shifted some of those funds over to some of the other routes that we have, primarily moving over into the NHS and using some of the STP funds that we're using on NHS over into the non-NHS collectors and above. Well, what would happen with that? And as you can see here is that, the purple or the bottom line down there is that if we just continue to spend money like we are, and what happens, you can see there's a dip, but then it starts going up as we start looking at, the improvements that we make as using more of a computer-driven selection process on the pavements. But, what you can see there is that, well, what would happen if I shifted the money from the non-NHS of 20%, if I shifted the money from the NHS, that's the red line up there of 20%. But then you see what happens up there. Well, what happens overall road if I shift the money from the interstate? And you can see that I start with about 52% in good or excellent condition, and at the end of 20 years that I'm going to be looking at about 56% in good or excellent condition. Next slide, please. Now, what happens though, and this is why I say that I just need to echo everybody else. You need to be very careful with how you actually produce this out. Well, what happens when you shift that money away from the interstates? And as you can see here, my interstates right now are running into the low 80s on the good or excellent. And if I shifted that 20% of the money away, even though I only own about 800 miles of interstate, it just plummets to about 50%. But you can see that my NHS levels off, and my non-NHS actually improves with that. And so even though, WYDOT's goal that we report to the public and report to the governor is 51% of the roads in good or excellent condition, and I can meet that with the same amount of funding, but where all the traffic is, where all the freight movement is, where really a lot of the economic drivers are at, those roads will actually, as you can see there, go down significantly in the next 20 years by shifting that. So we need to be very careful about how we select these performance measures and how we report those out to the decision makers. Next slide, please. The other thing that I think is real powerful is, and the thing I want to call your attention to is that the bottom part of that, the bottom axis on that is you can see that we have some of these roads that are out there 60 years since they've had a capital improvement on them, a hot mix overlay of more than 2 inches thick, for example, out there on those. But these are my low volume secondary roads, less than 50 easels per day. Might have a lot of car traffic and so forth. But the thing I want, especially the people that are listening to the webinar that are listening in from the maintenance standpoint, is you can see out there that you have a lot of roads that are going down about 20 years, 25 years, and they're starting to show some pretty bad conditions. But then you see all of those onto the right-hand part of the screen. Those are really the roads that are older than 30 years, between 30 and 60 years old. And as you can see there, that there's a lot of them on this rating that we have out there that are actually doing very well. Well, why they are doing well, of course, is that maintenance is out there patching, maintenance is out there doing chip seals, crack sealing, all those other things that maintenance people do out there in order to maintain that road. And so, the thing I really want to stress is that, those need to be captured. When I report to the legislature that I need $134 million, obviously what I can't have them do is say, oh, I'm going to take away the money that you're using for crack seals and the money you're using for chip seals right now and shift it over there, because all of those jobs out there on the right, those jobs that, really I think the asset management plan is really calling the life cycle costs, because that's part of that life cycle cost in order to get those roads to last that long, in order to get this the deterioration curve that you see in green to act like that, depends so much on the maintenance being able to do their work that's out there, and that needs to be brought out to the decision makers, that you just can't shift funds around blindly and think that things are going to continue to perform. Next slide, please. So we also have a maintenance quality control quality assurance program. We go out there and we also gather those other things like what North Carolina was describing, and trying to keep track of these are the things, the fences and the roadside vegetation and the drainages and all those other things that maintenance has to do in order to be able to determine what level of service are we actually providing for those other items out there. And we also obviously need to be able to capture those costs and be able to show whether we're improving or decreasing the level of services that we have out there. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we do is, this is our capital program, and this is part of what I was trying to put out. So you add the numbers up, and they should come out about 100% down there. But you can see the 54% of WYDOT's capital construction budget that we put out for contract goes to pavement, 15 goes to safety, 10% goes to bridge, but 6% goes to maintenance. And the issue that I have is that, we got to make sure that the decision makers understand that, this is really a 0% budget game that we normally play year to year. This is the money I got. This is how I'm spending it. And if you come in and tell me that, okay, I want to improve pavement, it's got to come somewhere else out of there. So one of these other ones has to go down by that same percentage. And as I say, is that they all have ramifications, but the one that we're spending about 6% a year on maintenance is that either through maintenance quality assurance quality control is going to go down, or some of those models that we have on the long-term pavement condition is actually going to go down if you start cutting away at that. Next slide, please. So in summary, from YDOT's perspective, really what I want to leave everybody with is that most of us are doing asset management out in the states. That is that's what we do. What we really need to do is document it and be transparent. Make the decision makers aware of where the money is going to and what performance that it's actually giving us back in return. We need to capture the cost, both of contract work and work done by maintenance forces in the state to really do that in a good manner where we can actually report back on and this is the performance that we're giving out there. So, we included in the long range plan. That's where you saw that we were able to document that it's $134.5 million needed back when we did that in 2000 a couple years ago. We include the maintenance work in that pavement projection that I showed you with the deterioration curve, and we validate through maintenance quality assurance on what the condition of the roads are and so forth. And it's critical in the whole life cycle cost. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to Hanya, and we'll start taking questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. This concludes our presentation for today, and thank you to all of our presenters. This has been a fabulous set of sharings that we all are gaining from. So if you have any questions, please type it into the Q&A feature right now, and we'll take them in the order that they are submitted. So we have our first question is for Jennifer, and the question is, who populates the planned work that's shared across departments and divisions? Does that come through your office, or is that populated by the department/division planning the work?
It's done by the division that actually plans the work, and how the process of how that works is I have a couple of people here that are on call. If a division has questions about how to do that plan, they'll go out and sit down with them. Our best example is one division that the division maintenance engineer, the top maintenance guy, brings together his county maintenance engineers and other people that have pieces of that money. He brings them all together in a room, and they actually do their plan as a group, and they use a computer training room to do it so that they can all put in their data at the same time with my folks down there helping them with the data or the data entry pieces of it. So that's our best example. We use them as a model in lots of places.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Then there's a question for Louisiana DOT. How did you go about selecting the specific considerations listed in your risk register? Also, how did you develop your ratings for both consequence and likelihood?
Repeat that real quick. We was unmuting and it kind of muted over. It went over the top of the question.
Okay, I'll say it one more time. So how did you go about selecting the specific considerations listed in your risk register? Also, how did you develop your ratings for both consequence and likelihood?
Well, one of the things that we did was we did look at Minnesota's and Vic roads and kind of mimicked it off of theirs very much. And basically, we only had done the agency level so far, and we've done a proportion of the agency level. We've got, when the consultant comes in next week, we'll be doing the program and the project level risk register. But the way we did it was we got a group in, and we went over we kind of just described what are risks, what a risk register was, kind of showed them how it goes together in the Minnesota and the Vic roads, a portion of it, and basically gave some examples. And then at that point, we brainstormed over what would be our risk here, what would be the cause of the risk, and what would be the mitigation likelihood, and what would be the impact. And that's kind of how we did it. It was just like a group got together and brainstormed over what our risks were after understanding examples and kind of where we were.
Thanks, Vince. Our next question is for all three presenters. How is your state currently incorporating risk-based assessment of your assets, and how do you think you can improve?
Well, we'll go first in Louisiana real quick. As of right now, we don't have a formal process for risk, and that's why I think the risk register, and this is one of the hard, we put it as one of our challenges, was actually getting that. However, I will go back and say, we have a detailed process picking projects on the capital side. We have a bridge committee, a roadway committee, and a bunch of committees for all the funds that we have that prioritize and picks these projects. When they're doing that, they have a bunch of criteria that they look at for these projects. And they discuss, in a meeting, okay, we need to do this project or this project because of. So I think all in all, they are considering these risks. It's just not a formal process. And maybe with the formal process, it won't be some risk that we think of that may not be forgotten in one session or not. But they do, I think risks are considered. It's not in a formal process right now, and I think that's kind of where we are.
Jennifer? Martin?
Yep. Okay. And just to echo on what Louisiana said, there is what I was calling the silos of excellence out there. That really what it is that, and I'll use Bridge as an example, is that Bridge actually has a fairly robust on a project selection. And when you go in there, if I understand what I'm reading from the federal government, as far as, there should be really, 3 tiers to this. It should be the agency-wide one, as what Louisiana was talking about. There should be the project level one, such as, what would happen if, a contract didn't get enough funds or the contractor failed on it. But then you have what I'm looking at is that program level, which is actually the asset management. And that's what I'll be talking about here just real quickly. From an asset management standpoint on the risk is that, for example, as I say, on the bridges, they're looking at bridges as a system level risk. So they're looking at which ones, grouping together the fracture critical ones, the ones with a scour potential, and they're including those items in the risk. And then what I want to just really stress, because Louisiana hit on it, is they actually have what I would call a fairly robust risk way of performing risk, and it's kind of the same thing over there in pavement. Of course, their risk is completely different. What's the accuracy when they do their sampling, or a continuous measurement that they have out there. They're applying, like what I showed you on that one slide, the model, the deterioration model of being with less than 50 easels. Well, what happens if if the easels go up on that particular road? How much is it going to impact it? So, when it's one of those things that each one of these guys at a program level, they're looking at these centers, the committees that Louisiana was talking about. They're considering those things when they do that. So now it's just a matter of, let's not make it horribly hard. Step out there and document for the asset management plan what you're considering in your state as being risk. And like I say, that the reality is, you read those little guides that FHWA put out and so forth, and I will admit that they're pretty good things out there, and they start talking about risk can be, you're applying more money to roads that have a higher ADT. Take a look at those and break them down and get them documented into your asset management plan. That's the approach that Wyoming is taking right now. So I'll turn it back over.
Hey, Yana.
Hi, Jennifer.
I was having technical difficulty. I had muted my phone in my office.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry about that. I like what we're having a hard time putting our hands around risk at this point. I like what Vince had with his risk register. We have done more of it on the capital side with that strategic mobility formula, where they're incorporating all sorts of different needs into that formula as they choose their projects. We haven't really done as much on the maintenance and operations side.
Okay, and the last question is for Jennifer, but for others as well, which is When you have the external-facing websites, are you actually tracking how many hits you're getting on those pages and where they're coming from?
Oh, that's a really good question. I am not tracking that. We have a performance measures group that's in our strategic planning office that tracks those sorts of things. I haven't seen a report from them recently as to who actually hits those sites. I think it's more other transportation agencies than it is just somebody living in a resident living in a county.
Louisiana or Wyoming, do you have any experience with tracking who's actually hitting your website?
At this time, I think I'm the same way as Jennifer. We really don't know. That would be something in our IT department if they're tracking it. I really do not know the answer.
I'm sure they can, but I don't think we're tracking anything at this moment.
Yes.
As far as the asset management goes, for sure.
Yeah.
And
Martin?
from Wyoming's standpoint, is that we do track the numbers, and I did see the numbers on what we put out there. We're going to try to get it a little bit more robust because, quite frankly, right now, when you look out at Wyoming's, for example, under the planning section, the long-range plan, and so forth, that the data really is fairly difficult to understand. So right now, we're getting minimal. We're going to try to beef that up a little bit and make it easier to understand. But we do track the numbers. I don't know who's doing the hits on it, but I do know that it's actually a fairly minimal number for Wyoming.
Thanks, Martin. There was just a question about whether people can get the slides, and just a reminder that the slides and the video, which basically has the audio component of both the slides and the voice, will be up on the AASHTO Asset Management website, which is tam.transportation.org, and then you click webinars, and we will try to get that up this week, if not by the early part of next week. All right, with that, just wanted to announce that we have another webinar scheduled on asset management, and adaptation to climate change and extreme weather events. It will be held on November 13th at 2 p.m. I hope you'll be able to join us. Additional webinars have been scheduled as well, and under this program we will have 6 more. So if you have a specific topic related to asset management that you would like to see featured in the webinars, please let us know. And you can do that either through the AASHTO website, or when you're on right now, you could put that in the Q&A. Thank you, everyone, and look forward to connecting with you in 2 months. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.